when a disgraced human sanitation worker aboard the galaxy's most prestigious military station casually gives his threadbare blanket to a freezing predator cub, he unknowingly triggers a cultural crisis that will shake the foundations of interstellar diplomacy. The Velkran, apex hunters who have conquered 12-star systems and bow to no one, suddenly find their honor-bound warrior cubs refusing to sleep anywhere except outside the humans' quarters. What begins as a simple act of kindness spirals into a hilarious and tension-filled standoff between military protocol, ancient predator customs, and one very confused janitor who just wants to finish mopping the hallways in peace. This is the story of how humanity's most disposable worker accidentally became the most terrifying figure in Velkran culture, and why sometimes the scariest thing in the universe isn't strength, it's compassion without expectation of reward. Listen, I need you to understand something before we get into this mess. My name is Torvik, and I am a perfectly rational being. I hold 3 advanced degrees in xenobiology. I have studied 47 different species, and I have never, not once in my 72 cycles of life, lost my composure over anything. Until I met Marcus Webb. The human was, how do I put this delicately? He was a disaster. No, that is too kind. He was a walking catastrophe wrapped in a stained jumpsuit, clutching a mop like it was a holy artifact, and somehow managing to be the single most baffling creature I had ever encountered in my entire career as station administrator for Outpost Helion 9. Let me set the scene, because you won't believe this otherwise. Outpost Helion 9 is not just any station. We are the premier military and diplomatic hub for the Galactic Coalition, hosting delegations from 63 species, including the Velkran. Yes, those Velkran. The apex predators who could tear through reinforced titanium with their bare claws, who had conquered 12-star systems before they were even invited to join civilized society, who made Klingons look like philosophical poets. And we had just welcomed Ambassador Crystal and his family to our station for a 6-month cultural exchange program. This was supposed to be simple. Keep the predators happy, don't let them eat anyone, maintain diplomatic relations, and for the love of the cosmic void, do not create an interstellar incident. Enter Marcus Webb, night shift janitor, assigned to C Block, where the Velkran quarters were located. I should have known we were doomed the moment I reviewed his file. The human had been transferred to us from 3 previous stations. 3. Not because he was bad at his job, mind you. No, Marcus was apparently an excellent janitor. He got transferred because he kept interfering with station politics and disregarding proper social hierarchies. In other words, he treated everyone exactly the same, from admirals to maintenance drones, and this made the higher-ups extremely uncomfortable. I remember the night everything changed with perfect, horrible clarity. It was 03:00 hours, station time. I was doing my rounds because I am thorough, not because I enjoy wandering cold corridors at ungodly hours. As I passed C Block, I heard something that made my scales stand on end. Whimpering. Now Velkran do not whimper. They roar, they growl, they occasionally make that clicking sound. That means they are about to rip your spine out through your throat. But they do not whimper. I rounded the corner and froze. There, huddled against the wall in the corridor, was Pip. That is what the humans on station had started calling him, much to Ambassador Crystal's irritation. His actual name was Crystal nor Shivkun, which translates roughly to Storm Fang who breaks mountains. But he was 6 cycles old, barely came up to my waist, and had eyes that were far too large for his face. And he was shaking. The station's environmental controls had malfunctioned in this section. Again. It was a known issue. K-Block ran about 15 degrees colder than optimal for most species, but the repair crew was not scheduled to fix it for another 2 weeks because, quote, Velkran are tough, they can handle it. Apparently, 6-cycle-old Velkran cubs could not in fact handle it. I was reaching for my communicator to call someone, anyone, when I heard the squeak of wet boots on metal flooring. Marcus appeared around the opposite corner, pushing his cleaning cart, whistling something tuneless and vaguely annoying. He wore his usual uniform, a jumpsuit that had seen better decades, boots held together with what appeared to be hope and synthetic tape, and an expression of profound indifference to the universe's opinion of him. He stopped when he saw Pip, looked at the cub, looked at me, looked back at the cub. Then he did the most human thing possible. He shrugged, grabbed the ratty gray blanket that had been draped over his cleaning cart, and walked straight up to a juvenile apex predator that could probably still do significant damage to an adult human. "Hey kid," Marcus said, crouching down. "You look cold." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tackle him. I wanted to do anything to stop this idiot from getting his face clawed off and starting a war. Pip stared at Marcus with those enormous golden eyes. His ears, which had been flat against his skull, slowly rose up. A small, uncertain trill came from his throat. Marcus just smiled, that infuriatingly calm smile, and draped the blanket around the cub's shoulders. "There you go. It ain't much, but it's warm. Mostly, sort of. Look, I've had that blanket for 6 years, it's basically indestructible at this point." Pip grabbed the blanket with both paws and pulled it tight around himself. The shivering stopped almost immediately. And then Marcus stood up, grabbed his mop, and went back to cleaning as if nothing had happened. I stood there, frozen, watching this entire exchange with my brain trying to process what I had just witnessed. The cub watched Marcus work. Just watched him, tracking every movement, ears swiveling to follow the sound of the mop sloshing in the bucket. After about 10 minutes, Marcus paused, looked back at Pip and said, "You gonna sit there all night? Your folks are probably wondering where you are." Pip made another one of those trilling sounds, but he got up, blanket still wrapped around his shoulders, and padded back toward the Velkran quarters. Marcus watched him go, shook his head and muttered something that sounded like, "Kids, same everywhere, I guess." Then he went back to mopping. I waited until Marcus had moved to another corridor before I approached him, professional responsibility and all that. "Mr. Webb," I said, using my most authoritative tone, "do you have any idea what you just did?" He stopped mopping and looked at me with an expression that suggested he thought I was asking him about quantum mechanics. Mop the floor? You gave your blanket to a Velkran cub." "Yeah," he looked cold. "Velkran are apex predators. Okay? They have very specific cultural protocols regarding gifts, honor, and debt." Marcus blinked at me. He was cold. I had a blanket. I don't really see where the philosophy comes into it. I tried a different approach. The Velkran have strict hierarchies. By giving a gift to a member of the ambassador's family without protocol, you may have created a significant diplomatic issue. Or Marcus said slowly, and hear me out here, the kid was cold and now he's not cold. And maybe everyone can just relax and let me finish cleaning so I can go home. There was no getting through to him. I filed a report, noted the incident, and went to bed praying that Ambassador Crichton would be reasonable about this. The next morning, I woke up to 17 urgent messages and a minor crisis. Pip would not sleep, would not go into his family's quarters, would not respond to his father's commands or his mother's coaxing. Instead, he had planted himself directly outside Marcus Webb's quarters, still wrapped in that ratty gray blanket, and refused to move. And when Ambassador Crichton tried to physically move his son, Pip had done something that made every xenobiologist on station start frantically checking their databases. He had growled at his own father. This apparently had never happened before in recorded Velkran history. When I arrived at Marcus's door, there was quite the crowd. Ambassador Crichton, all 7 feet of lethal predator muscle, standing with his arms crossed, looking down at his son with an expression somewhere between fury and complete bafflement. His mate Shira was making soft cooing sounds, trying to coax Pip away. 3 station security officers stood nearby, looking deeply uncomfortable. And Marcus Webb was standing in his doorway in pajama pants and a shirt that said, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right," holding a cup of coffee and looking like this was just another Tuesday. "So," Marcus said, taking a sip of his coffee, "this is new." Ambassador Crichton turned to face the human, and I saw Marcus's survival instincts finally kick in because he did take one small step backward. "Human," the ambassador rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. "You have complicated things." Marcus took another sip of his coffee, and I swear to every deity in this sector, he looked the 7-foot apex predator directly in the eyes and said, "Yeah, that's kind of my thing apparently."
"You want some coffee?"
"You look stressed." The hallway went silent. Even the environmental systems seemed to hold their breath. Ambassador Krikstal's ears flattened against his skull, which in Velkran body language meant he was either about to attack or laugh. I genuinely could not tell which, and I had studied their species for 20 years. You gave my son your sleeping cloth, the ambassador said slowly. My blanket, yeah, he was cold. You expect nothing in return. Marcus looked confused. Why would I expect something? He's a kid. Kids get cold. I had a blanket. Pretty straightforward math. Shira, the ambassador's mate, made a sound I had never heard a Velkran make before. It took me 3 full seconds to realize she was laughing. Impossible, she said, moving closer to Marcus with that predatory grace they all had. No species gives without expectation. This is survival. This is nature. You want something. Marcus said, clearly thinking about it. I wouldn't say no to someone fixing the heating in C block. That would be nice. But that's not really related to the blanket situation. I watched Ambassador Krikstal process this. His claws extended, retracted, extended again. His tail swished in that way that usually preceded violence. And then he threw his head back and roared with laughter. The sound was deafening. Security officers grabbed their weapons. I dropped my data pad. Somewhere down the hall, someone started screaming. But Marcus just stood there, coffee in hand, waiting for the laughter to stop. You are either the bravest creature I have ever met, Ambassador Krikstal said when he finally stopped laughing, or the stupidest. I have not decided which. I get that a lot, Marcus admitted. Look, about your kid.
He can keep the blanket.
I've got another one. But he probably should not sleep in the hallway. Fire code and all that. Plus, floors are uncomfortable. Pip, who had been watching this entire exchange, made a chirping sound and pressed himself closer to Marcus's door. Shira crouched down next to her son. Little Fang, why do you guard the human's den? Pip looked up at his mother, then at Marcus, then back to his mother. When he spoke, his voice was small but determined. He gave warmth without dominance. He asked nothing. He saw weakness and made it strength. This is not hunting. This is not territory. This is something else. Oh no. Oh no. I knew what was coming. I had read about this. There was one chapter, one tiny footnote in the Velkran cultural database about something called the Kreshesval, the guardian bond. It had not been invoked in over 300 years. Ambassador Krikstal clearly realized it at the same moment I did because his expression shifted from amused to absolutely horrified. Pip, he said carefully, you cannot be serious. What? Marcus looked between them. What's happening? Why does everyone look weird? I stepped forward because someone had to explain this disaster. Mr. Webb, in Velkran culture, when a juvenile perceives an act of protection without dominance, without demand for submission, they can choose to declare a guardian bond. It means, Ambassador Krikstal interrupted, his voice tight, that my son has decided you are his protector, his guardian, his Krishva. Marcus blinked. I just gave him a blanket. Yes. And in doing so, you have become the most important non-family member in his life until he reaches maturity. He will not sleep without your presence nearby. He will seek your approval above even mine. He will defend you with his life if necessary. There was a long pause. That seems like a lot, Marcus said finally. It is a lot, I shouted, losing my professional composure entirely. It is literally everything. Do you understand what this means? A Velkran cub has bonded to a human janitor. The political ramifications alone could destabilize 3 treaties. The cultural anthropologists are going to have a collective breakdown. And you are now responsible for a juvenile apex predator who will follow you everywhere. Marcus looked down at Pip, who stared back with those huge golden eyes full of absolute trust and determination. Marcus said. That was it. Just Ambassador Krikstal rubbed his face with one massive paw. Human, do you understand what you have become to my son? Not really, but I'm getting the sense it's complicated. You are his Kreshva, his guardian. In our culture, this bond is sacred. It cannot be broken except by death or maturity. For the next 10 cycles, my son will sleep only where you sleep. He will eat when you eat. He will shadow your every movement. Marcus took another sip of coffee, processing this information. So what you're saying is I've adopted a space wolf baby. That is not exactly, Ambassador Crystal started, then stopped. Yes. Essentially, yes. Cool. Does he need to eat anything special? I mostly just eat sandwiches and whatever the cafeteria is serving. The ambassador looked at his mate. His mate looked at me. I looked at the security officers. Everyone was trying to figure out if Marcus Webb was a genius or if we had all collectively lost our minds. He eats meat, Shira said slowly. Fresh meat. At least 3 times a day. He requires specific environmental conditions. He needs socialization with other cubs. He needs training in hunting protocols, combat techniques, and cultural education. Okay, so sandwiches are out. Got it. Anything else? This was insane. This was completely insane. And then Pip stood up, walked over to Marcus, and pressed his head against the human's leg. Marcus looked down, seemed to think about it, and then very carefully put his hand on top of the cub's head and gave him a gentle pat. Pip made a sound like a purr mixed with a growl, a sound of complete contentment. Shira's ears went straight up. He has never made that sound before. Is that bad? Marcus asked. No, Ambassador Crystal said quietly. It is the sound a cub makes when they feel completely safe. I have not heard him make it since we left our homeworld 6 months ago. The hallway was silent again. But this time it was different. This time it was not tension. It was everyone collectively realizing that something impossible had just happened. A human janitor had given a blanket to a cold child. Nothing more, nothing less. And somehow, that simple act had created a bond that our most advanced cultural algorithms had said was extinct. Right, Marcus said, breaking the silence. So I guess I need to get ready for work. Does he need to come with me? Or? He will follow you regardless. Ambassador Crystal said, you are his Kreshval now. Where you go, he goes. Marcus looked at Pip. Pip looked at Marcus. Can you push him up? Marcus asked the cub. Pip tilted his head, confused. I'm going to teach you to push him up. Everyone should know how to clean. It's a life skill. And that is how I ended up watching a human janitor teach an apex predator cub proper floor cleaning techniques at 0400 hours, while his father, a decorated military ambassador who had conquered star systems, stood in the hallway, having what I can only describe as an existential crisis. The rest of the station learned about the situation by breakfast. By lunch, there were 3 news crews trying to get interviews. By dinner, the Galactic Coalition Council had called an emergency session to discuss the cultural implications. But Marcus just kept mopping floors with a 6-cycle-old Velkran cub trailing behind him, wrapped in a ratty gray blanket, learning the ancient human art of not giving a single damn about bureaucracy. 2 weeks later, Ambassador Crystal found me in my office. Administrator Torvik, he said, sitting down without being invited. I need to tell you something. If this is about the heating in C Block, maintenance finally fixed it yesterday. No. Although Pip is disappointed. He liked sleeping in Marcus's quarters better than ours because, and I quote, the human snores like a dying star, and it is comforting. I did not know how to respond to that. What I came to tell you, the ambassador continued, is that we are extending our stay on this station indefinitely. What? Why? Because in 2 weeks, Marcus Webb taught my son more about honor, compassion, and strength than I have managed in 6 cycles. Because my son sleeps through the night now without nightmares. Because he smiles again. Because a human janitor with a dirty blanket did what an entire warrior culture could not. He stood up, moved to the door, then paused. Also, Marcus has started teaching him terrible human jokes. Yesterday, Pip asked me why the chicken crossed the road. I do not even know what a chicken is, but apparently, it was to get to the other side, and this is somehow hilarious. The ambassador left and I sat in my office, staring at my desk trying to process the fact that the most significant diplomatic development in a century had happened because a janitor could not walk past a cold kid without helping. Humanity, I decided, was absolutely terrifying. Not because of their weapons or their technology or their strategy, but because they saw a problem and fixed it without needing a committee meeting first. 3 months later, 6 more Velkran cubs showed up at Marcus's door, wrapped in various blankets and sleeping cloths, refusing to leave. Marcus just bought more blankets and started teaching them all how to mop. I gave up trying to understand it. Sometimes, the universe just does not make sense, and you have to accept that a human janitor is somehow the most influential person on a military station. And honestly, the floors had never been cleaner.